Great. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world from the IATEFL YLTSIG committee. I am Joan Kang Shin, the online events coordinator, and I'm delighted to welcome Dimitris Primalis, who was our first webinar speaker for 2019. So happy New Year, everyone. He is a part of our special series in collaboration with the Creativity Group. And Dimitris Primalis is an EFL teacher and teacher trainer. He has been teaching for 25 years, and he believes that creativity is an integral part of teaching. He lives in Greece, and he is working at Doukas Primary School in Athens. And he will be doing a presentation about, as you can see on the screen, practical activities for developing creative and critical thinking skills. And this webinar focuses on short, easy to do, fun activities with young learners at both primary and secondary school levels.
Well, hello everybody from sunny Greece. I'm really glad that I'm opening this series of webinars. People often ask me why I try to develop creative and critical thinking skills. And very often people think that it's a waste of time or there's no way that they can integrate that into a syllabus that's already strained. A few years ago, I was at an IATEFL conference in Birmingham, if I remember correctly, and a colleague said, yes, I want to be creative, but I don't really have the time to put everything in there. I have to do whatever the syllabus says. Honestly, there's no time and there's no way I can teach everything I want to do so that I can be creative. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on small activities, brief activities, easy to use, that you can use with your students, either by modifying traditional activities or having some outside the box activities. Let's have a quick overview. First of all, we're gonna have a quick look and see what exactly we mean by creative and critical thinking skills, why you think it's a good idea to try and help our students develop these skills, and how this can be done. And finally, I would be grateful if you could contribute with your views and experience, because after all, this is a workshop for frontline teachers. Now, before we start explaining what exactly these are, I would like to have your views. I would like you to write briefly why you think it's a good idea to help our students develop our creative and critical thinking skills. I'll give you, say, 30 seconds. Let's just exchange some ideas. Why would it be a good idea to help our students develop their critical and creative thinking skills? And once you finish, I'll show you what teachers from Greece wrote about it about 6 months ago. Yes, you're right, John. They're important 21st century skills. Exactly. It's skills they're going to use later on in life. More and more companies look for creative people, people who can use their critical thinking skills. That's right. Yes, Mike. For real world. And it's necessary in terms of cognitive ability. You're right, Alexandra. It's the basics for understanding oneself and the others respectfully. Lots of people believe that creative and critical thinking skills have nothing to do with exams. But most exams expect students to synthesize, to analyze, which are critical thinking skills. And even with the most basic levels of exams, students there, candidates there, have to write a story. Or they have to come up with a reply to an email, which means, of course, that they have to be creative. Creative for involvement and personalization. Yes, oh, that's what I had in mind, Mike, exactly. And we're going to see how we can personalize tasks. It's one of the driving forces of creativity and engagement in class, because usually those go hand in hand. Starting with a distinction between facts and opinions before judging something or someone. Yes, I agree, Alexandra. Right, now let's see what colleagues from Greece wrote. It was about 6 months ago. They felt that if they helped their students develop their critical and creative thinking skills, that would help, that would motivate them, it would be fun in class, it would engage them, there would be excitement, it would arouse interest, it would make the lesson more effective, it would avoid boredom. The problem with some parts of the world is that students are actually used to new kinds of learning. They would like to see more action, whereas a typical grammar lesson is not actually their cup of tea. Now let's go very fast and see what creative thinking skills are and critical thinking skills are. Now one might say they're two completely different things. However, they overlap in the green areas: elaboration, synthesis, integration, combination, complexity, abstraction and simplification, awareness and environment. And to my mind, it's quite difficult to do one thing without doing another. So this is a very good reason why I have chosen to talk about developing creative and critical thinking skills. Right, now let's go back to action and let's see how we can change some traditional activities. This is an original story. It happened to me 2 years ago. I was teaching a third grade, which means they're about 8, 9 years old. And at some point, they only know about email. So when I talked about traditional mail or snail mail, they didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And this is only natural because people don't write letters very often nowadays. So I drew a snail on the board and I explained what a snail is. And I told them that people refer to the term snail mail to talk about how slow conventional mail is. And then after doing that, we had to move to one of those tedious tasks that kids have to do every day in class. Rewrite these sentences in the simple past. And after a while, even though they were conscientious and they were trying very hard to please me, I realized they were bored. They were bored, I was bored, I somehow had to save the day. So basically I said, would the snail we drew on the board, would it actually do any of these things? And then they paused, they looked at me, and they started thinking at the back of their minds what a snail could do. And because when you're 8 or 9 years old, imagination has no boundaries, they said, could we write the story? I said, yes, you can write a story, but that doesn't mean that you want to do the homework that you have been assigned. So if you want to do that, that's optional. But this is extra work. You can choose if you want to do it or not. To my surprise, about half the class appeared the next day with stories. Now, here's one of the stories that I had from a student of mine. Once upon a time, there was a crazy snail. It lived in a garden. It liked the adventure. one day decided to visit Science Museum. In front of this garden there was a big street with too many cars. He didn't look right and left and started to cross the street. A car with high speed was coming. The danger was big. A cat shouted, "Be careful." The snail looked at the car and stepped back. It was safe. The snail thanked the cat and then they became friends. In a kid's world, anything can happen. Now, what I really liked in that story, it's one of the many stories that I had, was that the boy was involved. When he wanted to read it in class, he said, "Sarah, I asked my dad a few questions because there were some words that I didn't know." I said, "That's fine." But what I really liked was that he was creative. He used language in a very creative way, and even the mistakes he made were nothing serious. On the contrary, it showed some obviously the boy's willingness to learn. Now, the principle behind this type of exercise is trying to ask students to narrate a story from an inanimate object's point of view. It could be an animal, or it could be an object that is not living and is highly unlikely to narrate a story. From my experience, this intrigues students, and sometimes they can express their own personal feelings. Now, another problem that I have with my students is that they are not very willing to talk. They're not very talkative. They're shy when it comes to talking about things they like in class. They don't feel very comfortable doing that. Now, unfortunately, the platform does not support the program that I use to make that. So you can see the photo. This is a web tool called Laberize, which allows students to crop a photo and record it, and it moves the mouse as if someone was talking. Now let's listen to Philip. Philip is a shy boy. He won't talk much about what he likes and what he doesn't like. The lesson we had was about painters and about paintings and about art. Very low level stuff, the very, very basics. Let's hear what he says. I apologize for the quality of the sound, but I'll play it from my PowerPoint. Now let's see if we can hear it.
Hi, my name is Pablo Picasso. My eyes are oval. My nose are like triangles. I have a big oval head. My hair is like spiral.
This is what Philip said about his favorite painting. The reason why I chose this Web2 tool is simply because A, Philip could use this as a mask. He could talk about his favorite painting, but without really being exposed. Yes, I'll give you a link to the tool later on, Mike. And the second reason was that Philip could actually revise. In fact, he recycled vocabulary that we had done in class: oval, round, square, and he was even happier when I sent it to his dad. Another interesting thing about using this tool and this technique is that now with the new GDPR regulations globally, there are very strict, there are many restrictions regarding using the faces of kids. And in this way, you can actually make kids happy. They know that they have produced something, but at the same time, they're fully protected. Now, what is it that captivates young learners and teenagers, secondary school students, more than a book? Any ideas? Movies, that's right, yes. And if we can't afford the luxury of movies, ice cream. I'd love that, but it's quite difficult, especially when it comes to a classroom. What might attract their attention more than a text? Songs, that's right, yes. Netflix, yes. Themselves, and as Magdalena says, photos. Is it easy for you to access photos? Absolutely. Excuse me. And in most countries, teenagers tend to have their own smartphones. That's right, games as well. So one thing you can actually do about photos is you can invite them to bring their own favorite photo in class. The one that they would like to share with their fellow students, and invite them to think of a story. Now, the story doesn't necessarily have to be a real one. It could be a real or a fake story. They have to write on a piece of paper if the story is real or fake, and they can tell their partner. You can ask them to work in pairs or in groups and invite them to share their story, either with a classmate or in the group or even with the whole class. Now, at the end of the story, invite learners who were listeners to say if this was real or fake. Now, this is a nice way to personalize the task, give students ownership, and from my experience, there's no teenager who wouldn't be curious enough to listen to what another person has to say about a photo that they like. Now, another thing you can do with photos is you can use photos as visual stimuli and ask them to create a story. You can just give them the beginning. For example, if only the flowers could talk about what had just happened. Now look at the photo, look at the sentence, and I want you to try and imagine what had just happened. And this is a task that can stimulate writing, it can stimulate discussion, and you can invite your learners to share it with you and then have a competition on the school blog. And you don't really have to pay anything. Students bring their own photos, provided they're willing to share those photos. It goes without saying that it doesn't have to be something extremely personal, but on the other hand, there has to be a personal element so that they can be involved. Well, the key question is, bring a photo and share it with your classmate, a photo which is special to you, which has a special meaning to you. Now, another thing you can easily do is have a photo. I often have photos in class and I ask my students to describe it. But there's a big problem when they are asked to describe a photo. I don't know if you're facing that. What kind of problem might arise if you ask students to describe the photo? Lack of vocabulary, that's right. They focus on the words they don't know, that's true. And another problem that I face with my students is very often they will just talk about what they can see and nothing else. It's as if they're not using any other senses in their life. Yes, well, maybe they're not familiar with what is in the photo. It's true, but very often they're not used to talking about other things. Now, I want you to look at the photo and think of what sounds you can hear. You are there. This is from a Greek island. I took the photo a few years ago, and I want you to, yes, you can use Google Maps, that's right. But it's very easy to take any photo that you want. So I want you right now to think of what kind of sounds you could hear. Looking at this photo, imagine that you are there. Birds chirping, frogs croaking, that's right. Singing fishermen, sea waves crashing, very good. From my experience, this is not the kind of description that kids would do. And unless you invite them to use other senses, they will not do that very easily. Now, one of the things that I found very useful is if you look at the bottom of the slide, this is a website where you can download free sound effects. It could be the sea, it could be birds chirping, it could be frogs, it could be cicadas, it could be, there's a wide range of sounds there, which can actually help you a lot in class. And it can also appeal to people who are less visual and they're more audio types as well. Now, more and more schools globally, they tend to use either portals or they tend to use learning management systems, which are platforms where students can have discussions. And they can more or less like the social media, but it's a protected environment. It's an environment where students are fully protected from hackers and any of their personal data being exposed. Now, let me share what I did with my fourth graders. They're about 9-10-year-olds. A few days ago, I want you to listen to a piece of music, and I want you to write a couple of sentences. You can close your eyes. Imagine what's happening there. Who's there? Where? What's happening? When it is happening. So I want you to listen to the music, the piece of music, and I want you to write 2 or 3 sentences each about what you can imagine. Okay, fair enough. I know you all want to listen to it again, and some of you keep resisting opening your eyes. But well, I'd love to see you sharing your thoughts and your dreams with us. I love what Glenda has written, and yes, it's Vivaldi Four Seasons. It's winter, but the good thing is if you're a 9 or a 10-year-old, in all likelihood you don't really know who Vivaldi is, or even if you have heard about him, it doesn't really mean anything special, simply because you're inundated with information about composers and music. So it might sound familiar, but then it might not. Now let's see what some of my students came up with. I asked them, I opened a discussion. You can easily do that on an LMS. And I asked them, I invited them to take notes, and this is what they came up with. It's not very clear because it's a screenshot, But if you have a closer look, they have, what's remarkable is that they have different stories. One is talking about an ant chasing a spider. Yes, not the spider chasing the ant. The ant was chasing the spider. Another one is talking about a thief. Another one is talking about hunting in the forest. Another one is talking about if I remember correctly, about swans and lakes. What I really liked is some of them use their sense of humor. And if you look at the bottom of the slides, one of them says to be continued. And if you look at 3 lines above the last one, there's also a reply, because this is structured as if it was a thread on the social media. And a boy says, very funny, but a little bit little. I tried not to correct mistakes, simply because I wanted to encourage them to start writing. When you're 9, 10 years old, and you're still struggling with the present simple and present, with the past simple and past continuous, you're struggling with vocabulary. I was very helpful, and it really worked. So if you have access to any learning management system, this is just an alternative you can do. Of course, you can do that on a piece of paper. But from my experience, they're fascinated when you ask them to use technology. They will do exactly the same thing that they would do in paper, but they will be far more motivated, and they would be willing to share it with people. Whereas on paper, they seem to be taking it for granted. Now, speaking of boring exercises, I think John can help me. Have you ever asked your students to write a guide about an area in their country? And students go, oh my God, not again. Yeah, we've written this type of thing about 10, 20 times. I work at a school that uses electronic devices, tablets. And one of my students, she was a newcomer, and she wasn't really willing to get engaged. And I could read in her eyes, it wasn't the kind of thing she wanted to. But as I was passing by, I couldn't help noticing that as a screensaver, she had minions.
Hi, I will show you around the Greek island,
well,
Andros.
it doesn't have to be a guide for humans, it could be
Andros
a
has
guide for
delicious
minions.
food. Also, is famous for her delicious
So the next day, she came up with what John is gonna play for us.
That's it, it's a very big village in Andros. I love that village. Wow, I can see all the island from up here. It's a beautiful landscape.
Calm down, you're gonna fall.
Please!
Okay, fine.
Also, Andros has a very deep sea. Let's see some information about Andros.
Great, thank you very much, John. Actually, it's not an app. She uses an iPad, and she used the app, the program that's offered with the iPads about. I think it's called Video Maker. And to be honest, I didn't go into technical detail, and I even asked her how she managed to make her voice sound like a minion voice. And basically she said, well, I changed the speed. And I was taken by surprise. I didn't really know that they could do that. But what really was interesting for me, before that, Maria wasn't actually actively engaged. She hadn't written stuff. It was the kind of thing that, oh, sir, you know, my dog has eaten their homework. Did we have homework? Oh, I didn't know that. I've lost my notebook. I wasn't feeling well yesterday. And another amazing thing was that she did it within a few hours because I had it the next morning. And basically it was far beyond my expectations. I really liked the language she used. Yes, she copied and pasted stuff, but that was a very nice point for discussion in class. We talked about it and we said, well, if you copy and paste, people might be put off and they might not be willing to read that. But all in all, she devoted time, effort. She was happy. She was very proud. And above all, what we managed to do was have Maria with us. She came aboard. Whereas before that, she was just a newcomer at school. No matter how hard I tried to invite her to join us, it was very difficult. Now, why do you think she was so devoted to do that? What was it that inspired her? I can see people typing. She could be a character she likes. Very good. Yes. Uh-huh. Excellent. Yes, debugging a dull exercise. Well, I would put it in a more politically correct way. I would say I urge her to see things from a different perspective. Yes, and she made full use of her sense of humor, even though she's very quiet, the sort of aloof, silent kid who will not speak very much in class, and she usually might answer with a yes or a no. She was able to express herself. Plus, all her class loved it, and I think it was her passport to becoming more sociable. Obviously, she took ownership of the project. She there was personalization. She felt that she was given enough space to use her imagination, her creativity, her other skills. That's right, yes. It's both critical and creative. It's true, yes. All right. Now, I bet everybody has been to a zoo, right? And, well, a zoo is a very exciting place for people, isn't it? But I guess it must be very boring for animals. But the question is, what happens when the visitors leave on Sunday evening? The gates are closed behind the last visitor, and the animals are left on their own. I want you to write 2 or 3 things that you think is happening when cameras are off. There are no noisy tourists prying into their privacy. Okay, I'll give you a minute. That's right, yes. Animal party. All right. Can you describe some things that happened there every Sunday evening when the last visitor goes away? That's pretty much what my students came up with. And I can tell you an anecdote behind that story. At some point, a colleague was stuck in traffic. School had started, classes had started, and I had to keep busy the class next door. But at the same time, I had to teach mine. So I just drew an elephant, a giraffe. My drawing skills are pathetic. I'm hopeless when it comes to drawing. But I said, what do you think they do? And I just gave them an example. I think I gave them the lion watches television. Because they knew how to use the present simple, and they more or less they had the language to the linguistic resources to cope with that. So they came up with similar stories that you came up with. And the colleague, well, she came about 5-10 minutes later. The next day, she said that her students came up with more ideas about what animals did in the crazy zoo, which is another example of what can happen if you allow kids to be creative, thinking outside the box. It only takes a twist, a small one, nothing really special. And basically, this is a present simple, typical activity. How do you spend your day? Now, right, how do I spend my day? I go home, I have lunch, I watch television, I do my homework, and that's it. But when it comes to using your imagination and doing different things, obviously this stimulates students' creativity, and they are far more productive. Okay. Now, another problem that I have with slightly older students is when they have to talk about advantages and disadvantages of a topic, and they have to write an essay. I don't know how many of you teach a bit older kids, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle. Most of the times they don't see the point. They can't understand what they have to do. They take it for granted, and the usual expression is, because this is the way things are. Why do I have to explain things? So once I was desperate. It was again Maria's class, and what I actually did was I said, all right, you don't feel like writing an essay? Fair enough. I want you to create a poster, and I want you to present it in class. Now, let's see what they came up with. My instructions were a bit more, well, I wouldn't say that they were strict, but I tried to give them some instructions. I said, I would like you to make sure that you won't write lengthy texts. I want you to use bullet points or short sentences. I want you to talk about the benefits and drawbacks. And I said, I want you to create the poster. You can either draw it or use an app to create it. I'm not quite sure which app they used. But this can be done very, very easily with a simple PowerPoint. Or the Keynote, which is the equivalent of PowerPoint in iOS. And then I invited them to come to the board and present it. Now, which one do you think is more challenging? To write an essay or to present the benefits and drawbacks of a topic? Write an essay. Presentation? Well, that's interesting. I think it all depends on the students. To some students, it's more challenging to write an essay. Usually they can't come up with ideas. To some others, speaking in front of the class. Yes, I agree. It depends on the group. It depends on the individual. However, by inviting them to present the benefits and drawbacks of an issue, gives other students the opportunity to be exposed to new ideas, to share. And what really happened in class is my students, because there was a discussion following the presentation, my students reaped multiple benefits from that. A, they spoke. B, they were exposed to new vocabulary. They had the opportunity to talk about it. Some of them took notes. And finally, they were asked to write an essay on this topic. So even the ones who felt that they didn't have the necessary linguistic resources or the necessary ideas, schematic knowledge, sometimes people don't have schematic knowledge at that age, they can't really cope with that. It worked fine with the class. And I was happy to see them being actively involved. Speaking of PowerPoint, very fast, let's see what you can do. Use technology in classes. It's true, but you can actually invite them to do it on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be technology. And sometimes technology might not work. Even if you have the finest technology, state-of-the-art technology, and if you don't really know how to exploit it so that students can produce language, it can become boring. Believe it or not. I would say the very same thing can be done very easily with a paper. Finally, speaking of PowerPoint, this is how I used technology. This is how I used technology with a student of mine who was very shy and she wouldn't speak very easily. Joanne, can you play Maria's video? There's another Maria. Maria is a very common name in Greece. Very, very popular. The video was transformed from a PowerPoint presentation. It was saved as an MP4 file. That's why it's so heavy. Hopefully, okay, Auntie.
Welcome to my island. My name is Maria. This is my favorite color, purple. This is a picnic for my ship. We have 2 glasses for wine, 2 tomatoes, 2 onions, 1 sandwich, and 1 cheese. Can you pass me the apple, please? Help yourself. Let's go shopping. Great. Good morning. Can I help you? Of course. Can I see the dog, please? Yeah. This is beautiful. How much is this one? It's $1,200. Here, $2,000. Thank you. Here's your change. Here you are. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Okay, I think you got the main idea. What I really liked in that was A, Maria was motivated. B, she chose the background, she chose the girl. This was done very easily with a simple PowerPoint. It's a simple PowerPoint presentation. And what was most interesting about it is that I invited Maria to write the script. And another thing was, when she listened to herself, she didn't really like it so much. And she kept asking for to be re-recorded again and again, which actually helped me talk about intonation, talk about how we can be polite. And there are some elements of her trying to be polite in there. So those of you who use technology, you can simply record people. You can act. You can use it as a play using a simple PowerPoint. That's right. It's true, and this is done in a very creative way. Not once did she complain. On the contrary, she was the one who insisted on doing that. She said, "Well, I'm not very happy. Can we record it once again, please?" Which was a very nice thing. And of course, she was very proud when we showed her mum. Right. Most of my teenage students, they basically love going on the social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Facebook. People who use the Facebook are very familiar with the timeline. So this is well, this is an activity I used with slightly older students. It's the year 2120. You're 120 years old. A journalist is asking you about the most memorable moments of your life. Create a life map with the most important parts of your life. Narrate them for the most popular website in the country. Which is another nice way of saying I want to be, but probably saying that from a different point of view. Believe it or not, it worked well. They were involved and they came up with beautiful ideas. And of course, when you teach younger learners, another very interesting way to help them develop their creative and critical thinking skills is by inviting them to write poems. Our course book had a lesson about acrostic, sanguine, and haiku poems, and I asked my students if they wanted to write a poem about their most favorite object. And this is an acrostic poem. Fairy godmother, bring me one. Is the present is good enough? Red like my queen, rapid like a shooting star, a little devil on the road, racing faster than anyone, incredible car. That's what you are. The boy said he asked some help from his dad, and actually he was very proud that his dad talked about Ferraris. I think it's a small masterpiece. And the fact that he used language in a more creative way, not following the rigid rules, it was something that everybody enjoyed in class. Now, I know that you all like memes, whether on Facebook, Twitter, or any social media you're following. I know that you like memes. Can we use memes in class? Well, obviously, I was in a very creative mood when I wrote that, and I wrote that for the creativity workshop. But what if somebody invited you to create a meme? There are applications, but some of them might ask for money. If you have a PowerPoint slide or a Keynote slide, you can very easily add the caption, and that's it. Now let me test your patience, and let's see what we can come up with. If I asked you to write a meme, to create a meme, but I want you to use models: must have, can't have, shouldn't have. Can we come up with some ideas? I think Mike has an idea there. I should have remembered my other wing. Yes. Very good. Students love that. And they can use models, they can use expressions, they learn how to use puns. Since time is flying by, another thing you can do is invite students to have a quick look at the news. Isn't that breaking news? Kardashian, new education secretary? Kim is seriously considering introducing social media as school subject. How many of you think it's real news and how many of you think it's fake? Yes, that's right. It is fake. But it is a nice way to attract your students' attention, to make sure that you break the ice. Scary. I'm not quite sure if for teenagers that would be scary, but it could simulate a nice discussion. That's a website called Break Your Own News, and you can actually create your own Break Your Own News stuff, and it can be a very nice way to stimulate discussion in class. And of course, you can invite students to create their own. Great. So, Lenka, maybe towards the end of the webinar, you can tell us a few things about it. All right, and well, let's go now to something more traditional. Twitter. Well, it's not traditional, but it's something that students love. That's another activity. Your favorite photo and give it a caption. Flying saucers invade Greek beach, swimmers, swimmer blames mojitos for that. You can create your own photo with a caption and introduce it in class, or you can ask students to come up with their own captions. Okay, and let's go now in mushrooms. Yes. Now let's go to something more traditional. Most students don't write newspapers, and to be honest, I prefer the internet. But this morning, this is what attracted my attention. Teacher salary to be tripled globally. Incredible as it may seem, the world leaders have agreed on measures to reinstate the lost prestige of teachers globally. Among others, all teacher salaries are to be increased immediately. In an effort to deal with global issues such as pollution, violence, and economic crisis, the world leaders have decided to take radical measures investing in education and teachers. All the other measures taken so far have failed spectacularly and gave us no hope for a better future. Now we trust our future on all the school teachers who wish to change the world. That's right, yes. It's for the, you can create headlines and the layouts. And the nice thing about it is you can invite students to write text. Usually when you ask them to write text and give it to you on a piece of paper, they're not very willing to do that. But if you ask them to write a piece of text for a photo, yes, they love it. It's true. Speaking of the social media, I saw it floating somewhere on the Facebook. How you find you can invite them to come up with other interesting expressions, which is basically recycling vocabulary, talking about feelings. Now, whenever I was asked to describe someone, I loathed it. I thought it was the most boring thing in the world. But I thought I found an alternative. I want you to have a look at the next slide, and I want you to tell me if you know this person. Well, obviously being sarcastic, but it was quite interesting to see my students' reaction. So you can ask them to describe someone who allegedly is lost, and of course it could be a famous personality. It could be anybody. Because we don't have that much time left, let me move on to the next, a few more ideas. I'm sure you've come up with far more interesting things. The what if? What if we could clone dinosaurs? What if we could travel in time? For those of you who are on Facebook, there seems to be a series of videos, what if, which seem to captivate learners' imagination. What if dinosaurs were alive? What if the Earth climate changed? Which is quite interesting. And in essence, it's a grammar exercise. It's the second conditional. Writing an email, an application. If you're a teenager, you hardly know about what you want to do in life, or you can't easily talk about your qualifications. But what if you want to be the first human to walk on the red planet? Now that would actually need a lot of imagination. Of course, that the email is not real. I made it up. But you can invite them to email their application to you, so that you can forward it to NASA or Elon Musk. Now, another thing you can do is invite learners to present and gamify it. Now, let's see what a student of mine came up with. He presented data about Mars. My favorite planet is Mars. Mars is the fourth planet close to the Sun. In 2013, NASA found water on Mars. In 2013, people think that they will live on Mars. How many years does Mars exist? He knew how to do that. He added a button on the PowerPoint, and depending on which one you click, it redirects you to the correct slide, whether if it's right or wrong. Correct? Thanks for watching. This is his slide. We can't really say it working here, but this is something you can easily invite your students to do. To embed a quiz. And by the way, creating a quiz is quite a challenging linguistic task. It requires knowledge, but at the same time, it requires critical thinking. Now, another thing we can do is invite students to come up with to reimagine famous paintings. So I invited my students to reimagine their favorite painting. And this is what Natalia came up with. The thing is, I explained that I wanted them to write why they have made those changes. And she justified that. There was a whole video created on that. It can be found on my blog. I collected all their answers, and it was very interesting because they justified their answers. Now, some very quick tips and hints. Stop spoon-feeding students. Encourage them, reward their efforts, and remember that developing skills takes time. Try to explain to parents the benefits. Most students, because they feel happy that their kids spend time working in language, they're positive. The minority who might object, just try and explain what kind of benefits they will reap, and still they use the language. Share learners' work. Be careful with the personal data. I usually share things on blogs, just using their initials. Try to be consistent throughout the year. Ask them to do creative stuff every now and then. Don't just do it once and then forget that they even exist. Here are some useful sites and books that you can refer to. Of course, the Creativity Group, which is hosting the event with the young learners and teenagers IATEFL-SIG. And here is my blog and my email. I would like to thank you all for being here with me and for sharing your ideas. Mike asked me about the tool. It's called Laberise. I think I've spelled it correctly.
Great. Thank you so much. So many practical ideas. So many practical ideas. I think that I learned a lot, and everybody who joined us learned a lot. And I'm excited because, of course, we're recording this. And so for people, I saw some social media posts showing that people were interested in coming but weren't able to. And so hopefully we'll be able to share with you on our IATEFL YLTSIG page a recording of this. So thank you so much, Dimitris, for sharing your expertise and your experiences with us. This was so helpful. And I just have a couple more words to say to everyone, just to give you an idea of some upcoming events that we have for the IATEFL SIG. So if you give me a moment, I'm going to bring up some information for all of you. All right. So I would like to give you some information about what's coming up for our YLTSIG, and in particular at the IATEFL conference that is happening in April in Liverpool. And so as you can see here, the YLTSIG has a pre-conference event that is on April 1st. And we have a great lineup of speakers talking about building bridges and finding common ground in TEYLs. So we have a wonderful plenary by Janet Enever, and then another one by Dave Spencer, focusing on different levels of teaching English to young learners. And then for the after lunch break, we have another set of talks that are going to be, done like TED Talks.